Hello
Sorry, Sam.
and welcome to How's OTLA 7 project. I will be showing you how myself and my ESOL colleague Melanie have been using audio to teach phonics. I have been trying to embed phonics into my E2, E3 functional skills English class. And one of the ways I did this was to turn the E2 functional skills spelling list into an audio resource. The aim of this is to learn using a dual communication method to improve reading, pronunciation, and spelling. One of the benefits of creating an audio resource is that you can give learners really clear instructions and they can listen to the instructions a couple of times to make sure that they understand. So this is part of the audio PowerPoint that I made for the spelling list, and I asked the learners to practice these words. They needed to listen to the sounds, read the words aloud, practice writing the words. Here is a sample taken from the E2 spelling list, and I will just read the words aloud, although if they are homophones, I will put the words into a sentence as this aids understanding. E.g., bare. The table looked very bare without all of its decoration. Bear. It was a beautiful white polar bear. This is an extract from an Entry 2 reading sample paper. Because the learners had understood the concept of homophones from the spelling list, they were able to identify the majority of the homophones in this text. I find it helps to annotate on top of the text in a different colour to aid understanding, and then I would download a copy and send this to my learners, which they said has been really useful. In ESOL, audio recordings recorded by a volunteer are being used by Melanie to underpin reading drills, underpin pronunciation drills, develop understanding of phonics, develop spelling skills, and for language acquisition. Here, Melanie has created a word sorting table to accompany a phonics audio resource. Learners find these really useful as it can be very confusing to understand that a long O sound can be spelt in many different ways. But when it is broken down and categorized like this, learners find it much easier to decode words. Here is some of the feedback we have been getting from learners, and this is from both the Functional Skills English class and also the ESOL learners. I like listening to it again to practice. I feel more confident saying the words. The materials help me to learn. I can read better. I understand some words that I hear on the news, but I did not know what they meant. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and are there any questions?
Sam, you're muted.
My dog came in and started wagging its tail and was making a big noise, so I had to mute myself. We're doing questions at the end, aren't we, I think? Are we?
I think if that's all right,
Yeah,
just because of time, I'm just really mindful that we don't want to run out of time. So if it's okay, if we could move now on to Natalie. So Natalie is teaching up in Redcar at Education Training Collective at FE College. So over to you, Natalie.
Hi, just can you see my screen? Oh,
Can everyone see that?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So at Redcar Cleveland College, we're now on the 3rd year of our journey with phonics. The first year we were a pilot centre, and that's where we used the toolkit from the ETF, and we practiced using the resources in our classroom, in the English classroom, mainly in functional skills English, and we were preparing ourselves ready for the reform, and we were trialing to see which activities worked well with post-16 learners, and then trying to create some of our own. The second year we continued the phonics project, embedding it into English classes, and we also looked at embedding it into maths classes, and I think that's when we discovered how phonics was supported with morphology. So in maths, we found that when learners understood what the word meant, for example, try meaning 3, penta meaning 5, it enhanced their memory. So they understood the spelling, they understood the maths terminology. So that's kind of what led us into the next stage of the project, which was embedding phonics into vocational curriculum. So we're now into the first term of looking at embedding phonics into the vocational curriculum. And I think what we've noticed this term is that we've had a lot of challenges that we didn't really have with the last 2 projects we did. The first challenge was how the different levels of confidence we have with the vocational team. I have a lot of staff, so the project involves hair and beauty, sport, public services and childcare, and a lot of them staff are quite terrified of spellings and phonics, so they've been quite reluctant really to get started, and it's not because they don't want to get started, it's because they're afraid and they feel very vulnerable. So this first term has really been about really supporting the team and trying to get the team to a standard where they feel comfortable delivering phonics into their classes. Because I think with the English team, obviously they had so much knowledge that once they had a little bit of training, they were ready to go. What I didn't realise is with the vocational staff, we did a little bit of kind of training, but they weren't still ready to go. So we've really had to support them. We've had to give them buddies. We've done peer observations where we've invited them into the classroom to see how we do it in English. We've got Tricia to do CPD with them. We've had weekly meetings and check-ins with them. So we're really, this full term has just been about supporting the staff. They haven't really started the project, but they have, because I think a big part of the project is getting the staff to a stage where they feel confident to deliver phonics. Another challenge is COVID. It's caused a lot of disruption in our college. So we've had a lot of classes that have had to self-isolate, and we've had a lot of staff that have had to self-isolate. Some staff have shielded and had to work at home, and they've been high risk. So there's not been the consistency that we had with the other projects where they can do activities and then repeat them again, because some staff have only been in maybe 2 weeks the full term. And also a lot of staff have had a lot of anxiety with the change to remote learning, and I think the workload they've had with that's been quite overwhelming. So then putting the project on top of that. So we've really had to manage the welfare of the team and how we want them to be on board with the project, but we've had to be mindful about everything else that was going on. And also just encouraging learners so that they understand the importance of phonics being embedded into their classes, in their vocational classes, because a lot of learners will go, well, I don't want to do English and childcare. So we've had to really think about the activities that we're using and that they're really appropriate and embedded naturally into their sessions. So we've worked with a couple of the departments have now started doing the activity. So he's the hair and beauty team. And one of their modules that they have to do is on infectious diseases. I couldn't spell any of these words myself, to be honest, but the learners have to know these words, these key words, and it's something that they struggle with. And what they'll tend to do in their exam is, because they can't spell it, they'll just leave it. So this is our hair and beauty tutor, and she's started off using some phonics activities where they're practicing. The first activity here that she's done is she's just had images and she's got them to try and spell them without actually doing any kind of breaking up of sounds or words. Then she's moving on to looking at syllables with these words, and then breaking them into like cards, like grapheme cards. So it's a step-by-step journey she's going on with these learners. So she's just at the early stages at the moment. We've also got a tutor in childcare who works with our teaching assistants, and they've been looking at phonics because they don't understand the terminology, so they don't know what a digraph or a trigraph is, and they need it because they're going into that profession. So she's been doing developing like their knowledge of phonics in the language rather than focusing on spellings. And our childcare department, we've been looking at some collaboration work. So the level 1 childcare students really struggle with spellings, and they have different units to complete. Some words they have to learn is like safeguarding and vulnerable. So our level 3 childcare students, part of their curriculum is that they have to develop a portfolio of resources that they would kind of use to teach. So we're getting our level 3 childcare learners to create the resources, and then they're going to go in and teach them to the level 1 childcare learners. So they've just started that, and it's not actually, we've not produced anything yet. The idea is there, and they've just gone away and they're thinking about it. So hopefully in January we'll have something to kind of to feedback on that. But I really like the idea of collaboration where the level 3 childcare students will actually create the resources and for the level 1 childcare students. And it'll be interesting to see how relevant they make post 16 phonics, because that's their age. So that'll be a really interesting finding. The sport students as well, when I met with the sports teacher, what was quite nice was that a lot of the stuff that I did in maths, it's very similar to what he's doing in anatomy and physiology. So tricep and bicep, and looking at morphology of that language. So there's a lot of crossover that we found there. So all I can say is that really the journey's just starting with this project, because we've had to invest a lot of time into our staff, into making sure that they feel confident and ready to deliver phonics in the session. I don't feel like it's been a wasted term, because I feel that this term has been important, and I think we need to invest time into the staff. So I'm kind of excited to see what the next term will bring, because I think that's where the real magic's going to happen.
Thank you, Natalie. That's good. Shall we have questions at the end? Who's next? There's Claire. Claire, do you need anything shared? Or you?
Hopefully it's there.
Great, it is there.
Lovely. Okay, so hi, I'm Claire from Macclesfield College. My project's about the language and the literacy in mathematical questions and how learners struggle with that. So I just thought I'd start off by putting a couple of the questions that I'm talking about up on screen, and just to sort of see how that makes you feel. So this is the actual question that I'm using with the students that I'm doing the one-to-ones with. This is the first one I give them, just to get their kind of perception and to work through this. I'm a mathematician, but even I, when I read this, just sort of got to the end and just had to sort of pause and go, what on earth is it on about? And I think, I don't know how many of you are math specialists, how many are literacy specialists, or neither even, but just reading that, it sort of, if you're a bit tired and a little bit like, oh, you've got to concentrate, I think, an awful lot. So that's one of the questions that I used with them. So I'll just give you a second to read that. I then used another question with them. I'm just going to put an example up again. So something like this. So in their first one-to-one with me, I gave them 3 questions. The first one I've just shown, this one, and then another one which was involving percentages. So I then just gauged their reaction to the questions, and this is just a selection of the comments from the students. They were quite distressed by the question. I purposefully picked students who we've had for probably 2 or 3 years, who have been on functional skills level 1 for all that time. They're just really struggling to get it. When the reformed functional skills qualification came out, it just added to the burden, really. They were struggling to get level 1 before on legacy, and now on the reform, they're struggling even more. And they're actually moving through the levels vocationally, but their maths is just lagging behind. There's just some barrier there that's immense for them. So what I wanted to investigate is what it was that was making the word problems so difficult for them, and could I overcome those barriers? And I had my own sort of preconceived ideas as to what it was that was causing the issue. But as I've developed the project, as I've done one-to-ones, there's sort of 4 main things coming through. Some students, they're not actually understanding the words themselves. So it's a vocabulary issue. They don't understand what, for example, I don't know, percentage means. Some of them are just not comprehending the question, their ability to follow the question through, understanding what they're expected to do and in what order. Some of them, they don't understand the genre of the question. So they understand what the question's asking, but they don't know which mathematical operation to apply. So they know it's a percentage question, but they don't know how on earth they've got to apply. Perhaps they've got to do some addition first, then apply a percentage to it, then take it off a total amount. And then some of them, it is just purely the maths fluency. They have no idea how to do percentages in the first place, for example. So as I've progressed with the one-to-ones, I'm finding that different students have barriers. And what I'm trying to do with them is develop strategies to overcome those barriers. So I've done 6 one-to-one sessions with students, and I've done wave 1. So I've had my first cohort of students. I've been liaising with class teachers to see if they can apply my strategies and findings to their whole class situations. And I've also been liaising with the one-to-one teachers so that they can apply any findings to their sessions as well. So throughout the 6 sessions, the students are sort of questioned at the beginning, they're questioned at the end, just to see how they're feeling. And a lot of those comments that they had at the beginning have gone away. They've developed confidence. They've got various strategies now to answer word problems. The main strategies that all of the students seem to have really taken to is underlining the key points in the question, and also ticking off each bit of the question. So if you think back to that first one I displayed, they're just breaking it down into smaller steps by ticking it off, so they only have to focus on one thing at a time. And I think that made the problem more manageable for them and less insurmountable. What's been amazing is the success rate they've been having with word problems in the lesson. So the last lot of data that we had for these students was last March, just before lockdown. They did a mock. And then we've just done a mock paper with them now after their 6 weeks of input. And one student had a 64% increase in their ability to get the questions right, basically, in their mark, which was just incredible. And they keep coming up to my office and going, "Oh, it was brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. Can I have more sessions?" Which I obviously can't do because I want a bigger impact, really. But they've loved it, and it's really made a difference to them. And I've walked past their classroom and seen them all working, and they're not sort of, I hate the word, but they're not as needy in the lesson. They're actually able to get on and do the work rather than asking for help. So just a few barriers that I've found, which I think probably very similar to what Natalie was saying. We're actually face-to-face here at Macclesfield, but with that brings students self-isolating left, right and centre. And one-to-one maths doesn't always lend itself to a Zoom. I've done it, I've managed to do a Zoom, and I've sort of been typing on the question with them as they answer questions and things. We've had quite a few redundancies which have not made it easy. We haven't been able to get a one-to-one teacher. And the next exams, or the real exams, are in January, February, and I'm a bit concerned that the cohort I've just had is that too big a gap? Will they remember the things that I've been doing with them? So hopefully the class teacher is going to keep going the strategies. So yeah, it's been really positive. The students have loved it. I mean, who thought they'd enjoy an extra 25, 35 minutes of maths each week on top of their class lesson? And some of them are also going to one-to-one as well. So they're actually getting their normal maths, their maths with me, and their one-to-one maths. So it's been brilliant, really, that they've had such a positive reaction to it all. So, I was going to just see if anybody could share their experience in chat as well. So I think we are getting a little bit short on time there. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Claire. It's really interesting that 2 of the 4 projects are using one-to-one, which is something maybe you can talk about, because obviously there are funding issues there. You know, that's the main drawback of one-to-one, isn't it? And yet maybe it's worth it if you're seeing those kind of gains. So that's a very interesting thought. Are there questions?
Sharon had asked in the chat about whether all of these learners are native speakers of English, Claire.
We've got a bit of a mixed cohort, really. We have some ESOL learners and some that are not ESOL. So the first wave that I've done, they were all native speakers. So the second wave, there is an ESOL learner in the group. So yeah, it'll be sort of a cross section.
Yeah. Claire, you said the exams are in February, maybe, and it's too much. Is that too much of a gap to show impact?
Yeah, I just didn't want the learners to forget. The very nature of these learners is, I think their short-term memory isn't great, or long-term memory, really, just memory in general. So this first little cohort that I've done, I'm quite proud of them, and I'm a little bit worried that they're on fire at the moment. I'm just worried they're going to have Christmas, then I think we have about a 4-week break, and then we put the first official exam on for our functional skills maths. So I suppose I'm just nervous that I perhaps need to touch base with them, actually, not just the class teacher, and maybe keep all my sort of first wave students sort of under my wings a little bit and kind of nurture them a bit through the exam, because I think they may forget.
Well, right, you know you've done something really worthwhile with them because you're proud of them.
Yeah, really proud.
Then, okay, let's find a way that you can communicate that impact rather than looking for some artificial sort of third party measurement.
Yeah. It's not all about that exam, is it?
No, but it is important that you do try and work out why you think it's worthwhile, because that enables other staff to pick up your good ideas, or maybe to, and I don't mean this in a negative way, to challenge you about your assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way that will take you forward. So please, you've done something really worthwhile. Dance about it and find a way of celebrating and showing that other teachers can relate to, and they will give you feedback on what else can be done, to make things even better. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question of Claire as well, please? Don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I've been doing digital technology for my project, so I've come from a different, this is the second session I've listened to this time rather than presented. One thing I've been doing is I've been using diagnostic questions off of the website diagnosticquestions.com, so you can sort of see how they process questions wrong if they do it wrong. One thing that I did have was across, when they first did it, they all looked at the question in one way, looked at a ratio in it, and just solved it like it was a fraction, because that was one of the options. And most of them gave that as the wrong answer. But then afterwards, I gave them the question again, and on that occasion, whilst they didn't necessarily all get it right, about half of the number that chose that wrong answer the first time round chose it again.
Right.
Most of them changed their wrong answer. So even if they didn't get it right, there was definitely thinking going on there. and I just wondered if you had used those and whether that'd be useful to you.
I've not used diagnostic questions, but what I've actually done is, so if we take that sort of first question with the war veteran and doing all those things, I've actually repeated the genre of the question every time. So my next question, my next sort of week with them was exactly the same question, but with different numbers in. So it wasn't a war veteran, it was somebody organising a party. So I wanted to see if they'd learned from the week before. So I actually repeated the same sort of question without them realising it 3 weeks on the row. The final week, what I did, just because I was curious, is I totally took the language out and just had the maths in. So for example, it might say add 15 minutes to 45 minutes. If the time is 12:25, take off 4 hours. So I tried to take off as much language as I could and just left the maths to see, just sort of one last time, is it just the maths here? Is it the language? Is it the and it's been really interesting. It does vary from student to student, actually, what the underlying cause is, but at least you can sort of unpick it and find out what it is.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
I just wanted to go back to something, Natalie's presentation earlier, just to say well done for persevering, because this bit is so important. I think, you know, getting them on board. I've done a lot of work with vocational teachers over the last few years, and that bit, that sort of getting them on side first of all and building their confidence, is really worth all your time and effort. I think they'll come zooming, chasing you down the road, trying to do it in the next term. You know, you watch.
Yeah, I think I didn't realise how difficult it would be, because I've only done it with the English team and I manage that team, to then go to teams that I don't line manage and then throw COVID in the mix and everything else. It's been quite a challenge, but we're getting there. I think they're about ready.
I've done some of it with construction teams, put it that way, and I think your hairdressers will be on board.
Yeah, to be fair, our hairdressing team are the ones that have been on board. They're the ones that are most anxious, but they're the ones who've been more on board out of the rest of the teams. I thought childcare would have been on board, because it's naturally embedded into their subject, but they've been the most difficult ones to engage. So it's been really interesting.
It's scary, I think, for them, man, because I feel like they probably should know.
Maybe, yeah.